What we should be focusing on, I think, is the people that we need in a service economy to do really important jobs for improving our quality of life. One is very well-trained people to work with small children. Early childhood nurturing and education, we know now, is really, really important. And yet we are not paying a living wage to people who take care of children in daycare centers and in early childhood education. We should find a way to professionalize those jobs, recruit people who have had more training and who can earn higher wages. And there are lots of other examples of that in healthcare, in care for the elderly. We have an awful lot of people now who are living for a very long time, and many of whom need care. And they don't just need warehousing in a nursing home. They need interesting things to do and be part of, and a caring atmosphere. And that takes people with skill, and it takes people that are paid enough. And we haven't figured out how to make these human service jobs into really important parts of our economy that are well compensated. That's a big challenge.
One of my ethical precepts is that everybody should be carried along, broadly speaking. In other words, if we're rich, we don't have to have people suffer.
That's Jeff Sachs. He's one of the most decorated economists of the past half-century. He's worked with the United Nations, with the Vatican, with countries all over the world, mostly on fighting poverty.
And the fact that we can't figure that out, that, to my mind, is really a failing of our moral insight, not a failing of kind of economic technique per se. If jobs are going away, we should organize society to help enjoy creative and leisure time, not, by the way, cling to having to have a 40-hour work week.
Now, does that mean Sachs is in favor of a universal basic income?
Well, it's funny. I am in favor of universal basic dignity, universal basic needs, universal health care, universal education. The pure cash transfer approach, I find a little naive, actually, though I can see some role for it. I think that the way we meet basic needs to an important extent should not be cash transfers, but should be by helping everybody to be incorporated into the decent systems which give people their health, their education, and their dignity.
So what would Sachs do if we made him chief economist of Earth 2.0?
You don't want to really create Earth 2.0 in the way that you've stated, because we're likely to make a disaster that way. But what I think is extremely important is to have a historical and a moral view. And a historical view says that societies change. They mainly change, in my opinion, because of technological changes. Institutions change as technologies change. We do things differently. We live our lives differently. Instead of working in the fields, we work in factories. Instead of working in factories, the robots work in factories. We work in services. So that's where history comes in. And then values come in by saying that we don't just view ourselves, in my opinion, as an open, unguided, evolutionary process. There are some parts of economics, like Austrian economics, will say, well, an economic system is just an open, self-organizing, evolving system, full stop. But I think that that's where the moral framework comes in, to ask, as technology changes, as we can do things differently, or do, in fact, do things differently, how should we adjust as a social animal living in a society for a decent, ethical world in which we should all be striving to be good people?
To that end, Sachs argues, there are some basic economic considerations to think about.
One is we're just phenomenally rich. It's unbelievable. And we therefore have solved in the macro average sense what John Maynard Keynes called the, quote, economic problem, meaning we don't need extreme poverty. We don't need suffering from deprivation anywhere in our world. It wouldn't take almost lifting a finger to make sure that everybody has access to basic health and education in this world because we're so good, we're so rich, our technologies are so smart. So that's one compelling fact for me, which is that things like nearly 6 million kids under the age of 5 dying each year because they don't get the vaccine or they don't get the antibiotic is just absurd and I would say obscene.